Hello, everybody. While I am making sure everybody is getting in from the waiting room, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Sydney Weitzel. I am a team member on today's call who is representing the Vaccinate ALL 58 team. First things first, wanted to announce that today we do have live interpreters on the call. So if you would like to listen to today's event in Spanish, we have some information for you. So I'm going to hand it over to one of our interpreters to give some instructions there.
Hola, muy buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a esta reunión. A través de esta reunión vamos a tener interpretación simultánea en tiempo real. Para unirse a la interpretación, si usted está en una computadora, usted va a seleccionar el icono que parece un mundo abajo de su pantalla. Después de seleccionar el icono que parece un mundo, usted va a seleccionar su lenguaje de preferencia, en este caso español. Le invitamos a poner el audio original en silencio o mute original audio para que de esta manera usted pueda escuchar solo en su lenguaje de preferencia. Y le invitamos a someter cualquier pregunta o comentario por medio del chat o levantar su mano al igual que cualquier otro participante para que usted pueda participar en su totalidad. Today we will have interpretation throughout the meeting. This will be a bilingual conversation, and we did just invite our Spanish speakers to be able to fully participate and join in the conversation. If you are a monolingual English only speaker, we also invite you to select the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen. If you are on a computer, it will be the world-like icon that is at the very bottom. You will select it and then you will select English and you should be good to go. Everything else will be business as usual, but if we do have any Spanish comments or questions, you will be able to hear the live interpretation. For anyone who is on a phone or a tablet, your options are different. You would select the three dots that are at the bottom right hand of your screen that says more. You'll scroll up and you will get language interpretation, select English, and then you'll be good. Para los que están usando una tableta o un celular, sus opciones para la interpretación son distintas. Usted va a seleccionar los tres puntitos que están en la parte inferior derecha de su pantalla, va a deslizar hacia arriba después de seleccionar la opción de más y va a seleccionar el lenguaje de interpretación y español, y no olvide por último oprimir listo o done para que de esta manera se active la interpretación. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. I am going to I believe, did I add you correctly? Do I have you in interpretation mode now?
Not yet. You once you add me into interpretation mode, you will want to update.
Okay. For some reason it's not. Oh, there we go. 1 second. There we go. All right, I'm going to update. And Nicole, I'm going to make you the host. All right, thank you so much for our interpreters being here with us today. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to set the tone for this event and remind everybody that this is intended to be a safe space for you all to learn, ask questions, and have an open dialogue about the COVID-19 vaccine. So please remember to be kind with your comments and respectful. I understand there are a lot of differing opinions about the COVID-19 vaccine, but this is just to serve as a reminder that we're all here to learn in a safe space together. If any individual's comments are in the chat or verbally disrespectful or inappropriate at any given time, given the space that we are intending to create today, we will have to remove you from the event. So please do keep that in mind. And that being said, welcome to Addressing the Facts, a COVID-19 vaccine family educational workshop. Very excited to have all of you here with us today. Today, we'll be hearing some youth perspectives from various organizations. We're also joined by Dr. Jenny Chen, Public Health Medical Officer from the California Department of Public Health Immunization Branch, as well as Kara Novas, another team member of the Vaccinate ALL 58 team. So thank you, youth, and Dr. Chen and Kara for being here with us today. We will get to today's agenda in just a moment, but I would like to mention now that there will be a question and answer portion of today's event. So if now or at any point during any of today's presentations you do have a question, I invite you to please insert those questions into the chat at any time. Now I would like to hand it over to our moderator, Arin Parsa. Arin is the founder of Teens for Vaccines, a youth-led organization that is dedicated to empowering teens to educate themselves, their families, and their communities on the life-saving power of vaccines. So Arin, I would like to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you, Sydney. So, hi all, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Arin, a 10th grader from San Jose, California, and the founder of Teens for Vaccines INC. We are a youth organization with ambassadors all across the United States dedicated to promoting the life-saving power of vaccines and empowering teens to become champions of public health. I'm passionate about keeping our community safe from deadly diseases. So let's get started. I would like to begin with a quick background on each of the organizations we have participating in today's conversation. So GENup is a California-based nationwide student-led social justice organization and student activist coalition that strives to advocate for education through the power of youth voices. Teens for Vaccines, as mentioned, is a youth-led organization dedicated to promoting teens to educate themselves, their families, and communities on the life-saving power of vaccines. The Youth Leadership Institute's mission is to build communities where young people and their adult allies come together to create positive social change, and the immunization branch of the California Department of Public Health provides leadership and support to public and private sector efforts to protect the population against the vaccine-preventable diseases. And the Vaccinate ALL 58 campaign, which is now housed under the Office of Community Partnerships and Strategic Communications, is California's statewide campaign for a safe, fair, and equitable COVID-19 vaccine for all 58 counties in the state. So on to today's agenda. So today we will begin. So we've already done the event overview, and we will begin with youth perspectives from each of our youth here on this panel. We will then have a COVID-19 vaccine update from Dr. Jenny Chen, who is a public health medical officer from the CDPH. We will then have the VA58 misinformation overview and a Q&A session, and finally the closing remarks. So moving into our youth perspectives, I would like for the youth on this call to have the opportunity to introduce themselves as well as provide some context for why this conversation about the COVID-19 vaccine is important to them.
Hello, I guess I can start. My name is Arhan Serpanini. I'm a high school senior from San Francisco, California. First started advocacy work through climate action, but more recently I've worked with a group of teens on public health advocacy pertaining to vaccine access and vaccine education. The reason that I find this issue so important is because I've seen so many students in my community who have struggled to gain access to life-saving vaccines. And I think it's really important that we make sure that vaccine access and vaccine education is available to so many. I've also had experiences with my own parents who may struggle to speak English. So being able to have access to vaccines and access to the right information is like really important. I can pass the mic to Ashens.
Hello all, my name is Ashens Limon. I'm 18 years old and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm currently a 4.0 anthropology student at Fresno City College. I'm very passionate about art, activism, and fighting for the rights of queer youth. In my free time, I enjoy creating art and going to local concerts and shows. And I've been a part of YLI, or Youth Leadership Institute, since 2020 as a youth journalist. I'm here today because I come from a very vaccine hesitant family. At the time of the vaccine, I was only 16 years old and didn't really have much of a choice on whether I could get it or not. I ended up taking the situation into my own hands and went behind the backs of my family and got the vaccine myself. I was told about how much I betrayed my family, how awful of a kid I was. And because of the situation, I now advocate for the rights of young people to have medical autonomy over themselves. You know, we as young people deserve the right to have a choice in our own health. And I'll pass it to Ani.
Hi, my name is Ani. I'm a public health advocate and ambassador for Teens for Vaccines from Los Angeles, California. 8% of Californians are under 18, yet those under 18 make up 44% of the unvaccinated within our state. I started my journey in vaccine advocacy after my mom refused to let me get vaccinated. When COVID broke out, I tirelessly urged my family to let me get vaccinated and vaccinate themselves, even creating slideshow presentations with data showing the importance of the vaccine. Over time, I shared the slideshow with other youth who also had vaccine hesitant parents. This allowed me to see the true repercussions that misinformation had on real lives. Because I did not have the authority to vaccinate myself, I lost my volunteer position, summer internship, and was unable to see my grandma when she was intubated. Some students are even forced to take a gap year from their university due to their parents not allowing them to get immunized. That's why I'm super passionate about helping kids get vaccinated and informing my community that is, majority made up of immigrants who don't speak English about the importance of vaccines in public health. I can pass it on to Kira.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kiera. I'm a high school student, 16 years old. I go to Edison High School. I've been involved with advocacy work with YLI for since 2020. At the start of the pandemic, I became a youth reporter, just like Ashens. So, it was kind of a struggle because some of the members of my family are also very vaccine hesitant, mainly because of fears and misconceptions. And while those fears and while that fear is very real and valid to my family members, I also have a lot to consider as someone who is at a higher risk for COVID-19. So education around the vaccine is very important to me, in hopes that people like my family will get vaccinated with less anxiety about the whole process, and while also protecting people like me in my community of disabled people. So that's why I'm really passionate about vaccine work and vaccine education specifically. Thank you.
All right, yeah. Thank you so much for all sharing your experiences. And now I want to pass the presentation over to Dr. Jenny Chen, a public health medical officer of the California Department of Public Health Immunization Branch. So, Dr. Chen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just going to go over some information about COVID-19 vaccines. The first slide is showing you the statewide vaccine or vaccinations up to this point. And it looks like this was made up to yesterday. So so far, there have been over 86 million vaccines administered across the state of California. In the ages of 12 to 17, over 2 million of youth have received their primary series, and that's 67% of the population. And those who have had the primary series and booster, it's only 40%, almost 41%, but not everyone has gotten their booster vaccines. Across California, compared to the total state population, this is all ages from infants to elderly. It's 26, almost 27 million who have gotten their primary series, so that's 72%. And those who've gotten their primary series and booster, it's 60%. So youth ages 12 to 17 are a little bit behind the general population. Up in the right-hand corner, you can see that we still continue to get COVID cases. Actually, we're experiencing a little bit of a surge at this point after the Thanksgiving holiday, and those have gathered. At this point, it's 10.7 million cases in California across the almost now 3 years. with almost 100,000 deaths. Next slide, please. So the latest news, or the most recent news, is that there are updated boosters. And what an updated booster is that it's called also we may have heard the term bivalent, which means that it has two components in the vaccine. There's the original COVID strain, or what they call the wild type strain, and then there's the newer Omicron. It's actually BA4, BA5 variant in the same vaccine. And this is to help increase immunity across a variety of strains. So as more new strains keep coming aboard, I think we're now seeing more BQ, I can't remember all .1. And this updated booster has been shown to help expand or broaden the coverage across even future variants. Okay, next slide. So when is the best time to get your booster? So actually, just as of yesterday, everyone who is 6 months and older can now get a updated vaccine. It's a little confusing for the younger folks, but let's stick to what's on the slide, which is everyone who is 5 years and older, who's had their primary series, can get their updated booster, and you would be eligible to get that booster 2 months after your last dose. No matter whatever it was, if it was a primary series or if it was, a first booster or second booster. So after an infection, now several people have been getting infected. You can get a booster vaccine actually as soon as you're done with your isolation and quarantine period and you're feeling better, which might be as soon as 10 days after you are first having symptoms of an infection. But you can choose to delay getting your booster shot by 3 months. That's a personal choice. It's not wrong either way, if you get it right away or if you delay it by 3 months. But after 3 months, you should probably get it. By then, your immunity will have waned. Okay, next slide. So during the pandemic, it's been shown in the data that several people have, mainly children, have fallen behind in getting their routine vaccinations. And so this slide is trying to highlight that it's okay to get your routine vaccines and your COVID vaccines at the same time. So for example, the flu is also, there's a rise in flu rates across California and the nation. And so it's perfectly safe to get your COVID-19 vaccine updated booster and the flu vaccine at the same time. Next slide. So this slide is to discuss about COVID-19 as an infection, and just to make everybody aware that this virus causes infection and disease across the ages, and including young children and teenagers. And people may say that kids don't seem to get sick, but there have been many hospitalizations of young ones and teenagers from COVID-19 infection, with the highest rates actually being in the youngest, the under 5 years old. So what the vaccine does is actually help lower your risk of being hospitalized, getting a really bad course of the disease and symptoms, and even death. There's also a severe consequence of infection that's been seen in children called multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children. That's the second bullet point there, Ms. C. This is when your body becomes highly inflamed in all the organ systems, and many children and youth with this syndrome end up in the hospital. The vaccine can protect against that developing. The most common vaccine side effects are pretty mild and usually just pain at the injection site and maybe just some general fatigue. And these are short-lived symptoms and, obviously reversible. So many people have received the vaccine at this point. It's been out for almost 2 years. And so over 200 million people have received the vaccine, and over 29 million children have safely received the vaccine. Next slide. So where can you go to get your vaccine? And this slide is showing different options for seeking places that do offer it. The first option is contacting your pediatrician, your primary care provider, your medical provider. So that might be in the doctor's office, sometimes a community clinic. It depends on where you seek health care. Another option is you can go through visit myturn.ca.gov. There are several pharmacies that offer the vaccine. Vaccine is free, so you can, and a lot of the pharmacies are on this visit my turn. I mean, not visit is not the part of the website, actually. It's myturn.ca.gov, and they will provide, appointments and locations. And that goes to option 3, which is also highlighting that pharmacies, local pharmacies also have the vaccine available. If you're 3 years old or older, you can get it there. Sometimes the pharmacy is not listed on myturn.ca.gov, and you might see it on their own website. An example is a retail pharmacy called CVS. That might be my last slide. Let's see, next slide. Yes, so let me introduce Kara Novas. She's part of our team for Vaccinate ALL 58, or VA 58 as we call it. This campaign is part of the California Department of Public Health efforts in vaccinating all 58 counties. And in an equitable manner. Kara actually specializes in COVID-19 vaccine misinformation and sharing strategies for how partners and the public can mitigate the impact and the effort to get more Californians vaccinated. I'm turning it over to Kara.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. Hi, everyone. My name is Kara Novas, and I am part of the Vaccinate ALL 58 campaign. So today I'm going to provide an overview on the topic of misinformation, specifically as it relates to COVID-19 vaccines, as well as signs to look out for that you may have encountered it and ways you can determine if a source is trustworthy. So with that, we can go to the next slide. All right, let's start with a few definitions. So for those of you who attended Tuesday's briefing, this information may look familiar to you. However, I know we have a few new folks on the line today, so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with what we need when we say misinformation. Misinformation refers to false or misleading information that is shared without the intent to cause harm, confuse, or trick an audience. It's often shared out of genuine curiosity or concern about a topic. Misinformation is very prevalent. It's likely that we've all come across it, and honestly, we're probably all guilty of sharing it ourselves at one point or another. This can look like reposting something on social media just after looking at a headline or without checking the sources. Disinformation, on the other hand, is false or misleading information that is shared intentionally with the intent to harm or manipulate others. It really comes down to intent here. And this could look like a specific group or person sharing misinformation to cause confusion or to discredit someone else. And last, here you can see we have malinformation, which is information that is technically true, but taken out of context, to which it can have a new meaning. While this is more of a technical term and not used in everyday conversation, we do tend to see a lot of malinformation when it comes to the COVID-19 pandemic and the vaccines. For example, someone sharing out their personal vaccination experience to be representative of everyone's vaccination experience, or alarming and flashy media headlines that grab your attention but leave out the key details. Misinformation often lacks the full picture, and the full picture is really important. That said, we're going to be using misinformation as somewhat of an umbrella term to encompass all 3 of these terms today. So now we're going to take a look at some signs that maybe you have encountered some misinformation. We can go to, yep, thank you. All right. As I mentioned, misinformation is everywhere, and it is really, really easy to believe it and reshare it. So here are a few signs to look out for that you may have encountered misinformation. One indicator you all should consider is if the information aligns with authoritative sources on the subject or trusted resources. Next, be sure to look out for claims that these have been exaggerated or blown out of proportion, or conspiracies that don't have any supporting data. Emotional triggers can also be another telltale sign of misinformation. Misinformation tends to evoke emotions, so you'll want to look out for any information that immediately brings out feelings like fear, anger, or sadness. Unmoving perspectives is also something to keep an eye out for. If you're speaking with someone or listening to someone that refuses to consider trusted information, this is a sign that maybe they've been influenced by misinformation. Not always, but maybe. So it's best to fact check the information by referencing trusted resources. And lastly, misinformation tends to appear when there's already confusion or information gaps around a certain topic. So remember to stay up to date with the latest information from trusted sources as it becomes available. Next slide. Thanks. So now, how can you determine if a source is valid or if it's just spreading misinformation? Here's some tips that can help you decide if it's trustworthy. First, checking the source. Consider the following. Who's sharing the information? Are they credible? Are they experts on the matter? Next, verify the date that the article was published. It's important to verify the date to ensure that the claim or source of information is still relevant, accurate, factual, or useful. Then examine the evidence. Check to see if the claim or source of information is being backed by evidence. This could be quotes from experts, survey data, official statistics, etc. Reliable sources will provide external links to verifiable sources to back up those claims. Next, consider the claim. Does the phrasing tell you it's believable or realistic? Does it use exaggerations? News headlines should have a reasonable level of believability. So if the headline seems far-fetched, there's a good chance it could be misinformation. And finally, do a gut check. Be sure to ask yourself, what's the whole story? Is the claim or source of information trying to get me to feel a certain way? Can you identify a strong bias? Is the claim trying to persuade me of a certain viewpoint? Hopefully, you can use some of these tips the next time you come across a source and are unsure whether or not you can trust it. And that is it for me today. Thank you all for your time and for coming to here today. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Arin.
All right, thank you, Dr. Chen and Ms. Novus, for educating us all. We would now like to turn to the audience now to hear some feedback from you with a couple of poll questions. So the first poll question is, where do you receive most of your COVID-19 vaccine information from? And please select one of the options. All right, thank you so much for this information. During our Q&A portion of this event, we want to address some questions regarding where you can access reliable resources about COVID-19 vaccines. Next, we want to hear, what has prevented you or others in your community from receiving the COVID-19 vaccine? All right, once again, thank you for sharing this information. And this question is actually going to lead us into the Q&A portion of our conversation today. So before I begin with our first question for Dr. Chen, I want to invite everyone to place any questions they have into the chat, and the questions will be directed to Dr. Chen as well as any of you that we have on today's panel with us. So as you are answering your questions, we will get started with our first question. All right, so looking at the results from our last poll question from Tuesday, many people are concerned that the COVID-19 vaccines are too new and were developed too quickly and have not been around long enough. So how can we know to trust vaccines?
Okay, so vaccine development has been around for a long time. The current most well-known COVID vaccines are vaccines called mRNA vaccines, and that is a newer type of vaccine that's been produced for COVID, but in reality, there's been a lot of research and study on developing this mRNA vaccine, and it's been going on for decades. And mRNA vaccines have actually been looked at for other infections, including flu, Zika, rabies, and a virus called cytomegalovirus, or CMV. Not only has mRNA science been used and looked at and studied in vaccines, but it's also looked to be used in cancer research. They'll use mRNA, which is messenger RNA, to trigger the immune system to target specific cancer cells. And so a lot of this information is actually available on the CDC website. What I'm going to do is, if I am asked a question, I'll if I have access to it, I'm going to post it in the chat. So for this one, I will put that in the chat. Back to you.
Arin, if we want to move into the next question on the list.
Yeah, sorry, my key got kind of stuck for a second. We do have a question from the chat. For the youth members, what has been a positive experience you've had working to educate other youth and their families on COVID vaccines?
Yeah, something that really was cool for me was just the validation that I get from knowing that other people have the same experiences as me, as somebody with vaccine hesitant family. A lot of the time I feel like us as young people tend to feel selfish, that we didn't have the chance, that like misinformation was kind of plaguing our families and we really had no control over it. And knowing that there's experience with different youth and that like you're not alone in this was something that really made me feel good about working with Vaccinate 50 and working with other young people.
All right, thank you, Ashens, and we can move on to our next question. So first off, these two questions kind of go together. So, what misinformation have you most commonly heard when having conversations about the COVID-19 vaccine? This is for Arhan and Kira. And then for Dr. Chen, can we please address a couple of these points of misinformation that have been circulating around the COVID vaccine? So to begin, can the vaccine make you infertile?
Yeah, I guess I can start with some misinformation that I've heard. Personally, in like my communities, first one is this idea of herd immunity, which is essentially when a lot of people, or like when one thinks that they don't necessarily need the vaccine if a lot of people in their community already get the vaccine. And the other thing that I've heard commonly, like common misinformation, is that natural immunity is greater than immunity provided by vaccines. So that can help, or like that dissuades people from getting the vaccine as well. I'll pass it back to Kira.
Yeah, so I've heard all of those things as well. I think that the common misconceptions that we hear as individuals are misconceptions that almost everyone has heard at one point or another, just because they spread so quickly, almost faster than, you know, actual factual information by doctors and things. So some of the misinformation that I've heard would be just that, like, the vaccine makes you infertile is a big one that my family was worried about. You know, as well as like the COVID shot, the vaccine itself making you sick as opposed to giving you immunity, or infecting you with COVID itself. And yeah, things like that are just really prevalent and untrue.
Okay, great. So I wrote down what you wrote so that I could address some of these concerns. Let's see. So let's start with herd immunity. Herd immunity is a difficult concept. It means that there are enough people in the community that have immunity so that some folks might think, I don't need the vaccine because everyone else already got it, or everyone else already is immune, so that protects me. It's dependent upon how infectious a virus or infectious bacteria is. So COVID is extremely infectious. So you have to have, it's estimated that you would have to have herd immunity be pretty high, somewhere between 80 and 90%. And we know that not everybody is vaccinated. I presented facts earlier that only across California, 70% of persons are vaccinated. And so herd immunity is probably not going to be helpful for most. Then natural immunity versus vaccine immunity. So with natural immunity, you can get some temporary protection, but it does wane over time, meaning the antibodies that you produce do not last. That's gonna go down over time, and you won't be protected after, you know, a couple of months, 2-3 months. And there have been several studies that show that if you happen to get COVID infection, if you get a vaccine, your immunity is actually stronger and broader. And also there have been some lab studies that show that if you get immunity from infection against that one strain, it's actually not giving you protection for future strains or other strains, or variants, I should say. And where vaccine seems to provide a broader variant coverage. There's some more information about natural immunity versus vaccine immunity. I can put that in the chat. I guess we'll keep going if there aren't any other questions. It seems that Kira had mentioned the concerns about infertility and whether the vaccine can cause infection. So I'll address the second part first. So vaccines are not, these are not live virus vaccines. So vaccines are not, these COVID vaccines are not taking the actual virus and sticking it in a vaccine, and so that when you get the vaccine, you're going to get sick. These are proteins or the mRNA is basically, it's a protein, but it's telling your immune system how to produce other proteins or antibodies to protect you from COVID. So you're not actually getting the actual virus, so you will not get infected from vaccines. And then the last point or question was about infertility. So there's no evidence that vaccines cause infertility. There's been several studies that have shown that. I can post that in the chat as well. So what the question is and what the studies have looked at is those persons of reproductive age who have received the vaccine, down the line, were they able to become pregnant if they're women, and if they're men in a couple, and were they able to help fertilize eggs and produce pregnancy? And so when they compare people who got vaccine, people who didn't get vaccine, there was no difference. So this translates into vaccine does not prevent pregnancy or cause infertility. And then, the one additional point I might make, since I'm talking on and on, is that, and then I'll stop, is that vaccine is very important for those who are pregnant. It's protecting the mom and the fetus at the same time. And there are several studies that have shown that when the baby is born, the baby has the protective antibodies in their system from the mom, and that helps protect them from COVID if they do happen to get infected as a newborn. And there's also been several, you can see the data that COVID actually affects pregnant women greatly if they're not protected, and there's a lot of complications in mom and in fetus and those who from COVID infection, and so it's better safe to get the vaccine. Okay, hopefully I've addressed all those. Maybe somebody else has other questions or comments.
Yeah, so we have a few more questions. So the first question is, what is something invaluable you have learned about yourself during the pandemic? And this is for our youth panelists.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so what is something invaluable you learned about yourself during the pandemic?
I think I learned how stubborn I am as a person, but also like how much I care genuinely about my community and how unfair like it is for immigrants to get access to healthcare and like public health information. I had to stand outside my school's testing booths because you would have to get your parents to consent to it. And a lot of our parents didn't speak or especially read any English. So I would stand there during like lunch and snack and even after school to help parents, sign those consent forms for their kids to get tested when they were returning to school. But also I was just so stubborn within my own community in accepting like no's. I got a lot of no's about, no, don't get the vaccine, or no, you're like this, or no, this is not necessary. And I think just learning like about yourself in the sense of like, I really do care, like this is a really important thing to me, and I'm not going to give up no matter how many no's I get. But at some point, I'm just going to keep on doing it for the students because those are the people who I'm surrounded with. Those are my family. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, and we have a question from Fabio. Scroll up right here. All right. So for the future, how often do you think COVID boosters will be necessary? Once a year, like the flu?
Yeah, that's a good question. I am not a good prognosticator, I would say. I can't quite see into the future, but I think that there are some schools of thought that suggest that that might be the way going forward, is that it will be similar to the flu vaccine, kind of getting a booster around the winter season. The only caveat with that is that thus far, COVID has not been really seasonal, meaning only coming in the winter. It's also, we've had waves in the summer, which is why I think there have been sort of several boosters recommended along the past couple of years. But as the COVID variants develop, we'll have to see how things go. It seems that we're able to, with this updated booster, to be able to broaden our immunity to cover future variants. So hopefully that will, and the way vaccines work is that you're developing memory cells in your immune system. And so hopefully that if there are variants over the summer that develop, that would, we would be covered by our current updated booster vaccine. So yeah, hopefully it will end up being something like once a year. That I think would be ideal. Back to you.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Chen. And for any of our youth panelists, is there anything else you want to mention? All right, so then we can wrap up now. So thank you all so much for your participation in today's event. We truly appreciate your time and the discussion. We hope it was useful to you. Please visit our Action Hub for more information and resources. We will send out this slide presentation where all of the links and resources will be available to you. And from all of us, bye for now.
If the teen organizers want to stay on, feel free, we can chat for a bit. Nicole or someone from my team, if you can make me a host again, I can help clear the room.